Guys, I am so stoked to share this build with you. I had no intentions of ever filming this build, but I realized that there's probably a lot of people out there that would want to see it. I've been building bikes for about 10 years. You can see some of them behind me in the video. I realized over the years that there's a lot of information that I take for granted. This channel is to help educate and share with you guys some of what I learned over the years. So back to the build. This is going to be a ground up build. Well, see, kind of. I had actually already stripped the bike completely down, restored basically all the components, and then built the bike back into a roller. I then realized that I should probably film some of it, so I tore the bike back down to the components you saw in the first picture. Like and subscribe if you appreciate me tearing apart a perfect bike just for this video. I'll be sharing with you the buildup of what you see in front of you, but there's a handful of more intricate parts that I've already rebuilt, and then I decided not to tear back down just for the sake of this video. Those are things like the motor, the shocks, the brake calipers, swing arm linkages, etc. If you guys are interested in a true 100% restoration video one day, then let me know you're out there by commenting on this video. This bike is one I've been excited about building for a really long time. My excitement for this project stemmed from the ambition to try and make one of the best stock frame 250 QuadRacers I possibly could. When it came time to choosing the year of the bike I wanted to build, I had a handful of options. Suzuki built the LT250r from 1985 to 1992. 1992 definitely being the most flamboyant year by far as graphics, but also it boasted a couple of upgrades over the previous years. The 1992 250 QuadRacer is defined as part of the third generation of 250 QuadRacer. The first generation was from 1985 to 1986, the second generation from 87 to 90, and the third generation from 91 to 92. Because of all the upgrades to the 250 QuadRacer over the years, and the redesigned rear suspension system on the third generations, I decided that a Gen 3 was the platform I wanted to build off of for this build. And I chose the 92 over the 91 because mechanically they're identical, and though it was close, the 92 was definitely the boldest in the looks department. To build this bike up into what I'd envisioned, it meant rounding up parts for quite a while until I had what in my mind was the best of the best stuff everywhere. This list includes, but is not limited to, an iconic Duncan Racing front bumper, OMF beadlock wheels all the way around, new Mare race cut yellow fenders, brand new OEM hood and hood cap, a mint original 92 camo seat, that was a big ticket item, Lone Star steering stem, FTZ ported motor to pair with their gigantic FTZ pipe and FTZ carburetor, rebuilt Works shocks all the way around. I went with Works because they're one of the only companies that offered a rear aftermarket shock for the third generation 250 QuadRacer. You'll notice that the bottom mount is a wishbone style as opposed to the solid style of the first generation and second generation 250 QuadRacer. A Lone Star -1 swing arm for MX Racing, a Durablu axle, and a 4x110 aluminum set of hubs for the 26 spline Suzuki axle. That's a good chunk of the list. I did decide on full flight A-arms because of honestly aesthetics. I think they look killer on this bike. I've never had an issue with full flight A-arms, and honestly, they're one of the only companies that had the thicker tubes, and that's what I was going for with this build, so they made the cut. I think they look awesome. When it came to powder coating, I went with a 2-stage anodized blue for the frame. It required a chrome base layer and a translucent blue top coat for the frame. The springs are matched to Suzuki yellow. The A-arms and swing arm are obviously white. I won't get into too many more details right now, but again, if you want to see a true 100% ground up build, then let me know you're out there by commenting one day and maybe it'll happen. Anyways, that's enough talking. Let's dive into it. When it comes to cleaning, I always use WD-40. WD-40s work great for me over the years, and a pro tip for you guys, if you want to use WD-40 for a bunch of things, don't get the aerosol cans. Get the non-aerosol can here, and then buy it by the gallon. If you do that, you will save yourself so much money, it's crazy. So before I put the engine in, I'm actually going to utilize these U-bolts and hook that hooking bolt to the foot pegs. I have to mount the foot pegs on really quick. And then when I do that, obviously the ATV will be very secure to the stand, which is huge when it comes to working on these things. One more thing I was going to mention too are these colored sockets. I highly recommend them. They are from Harbor Freight, but nothing's ever broken on me. I've never had any issues with them yet. So to date, I do recommend them. The colored sockets just make finding sockets so much easier. No longer do you have to try to find roughly the right size socket, and then spin it around, try to read what number it is and whatnot. I see this is a 14, I see it's red, it's a 14, I move on, I go. I'm only gonna put one foot peg on for now, just so getting the engine in from the other side is easier. But you can see just with this one bolt and foot peg, this thing is like rock solid to the stand. It's not going anywhere. If you're planning on just stripping your bike down and then throwing away all your old bolts, make sure you keep a couple of them. Make sure you keep this swing arm pivot bolt, this lower engine mount bolt, and then any of your swing arm linkage bolts. Essentially, if you see a big bolt or a long bolt, go ahead and keep it just in case. The bolt kits are a great idea. Spec bolt, I highly recommend. However, there's a handful of bolts they don't come with. Essentially, anything that's huge, they don't come with. So just keep that in mind whenever you're tearing your bike down. When you're putting your engine in, I like to start with this bottom engine mount bolt because it's essentially a fulcrum to support the weight of the engine, and then it is the perfect pivot point to then line up your front, line up your back bolts. It's just the bolt I would start with. If your bike doesn't have a spacer, or actually it's supposed to have two spacers, one on each side, they are the same size on the second gens, the second and third gens, and it's smart to get your bolt ready to go, get it into the hole, get the spacer, get it flush with the end of the spacer, and then put your engine in. You'll see I'm gonna put the engine in here and I will try and line it up. I put this cloth on it just because it's such a nice engine and the frame's really nice too. I'm gonna basically just put it in and then just rock it forward a little bit until I can line up this bolt. I'll put it in, I'll find the spacer on the bottom of it, I'll put the bolt all the way through, and then I can then use this bolt to very comfortably and safely line up all of my other bolt locations. Another huge perk of this Pit Posse ATV lift is this gigantic oil drain cutout in it. And because it's so huge, I can actually put my hand up through the bottom and line up this spacer without any issues. So this is it just makes the whole assembly process go so much smoother having this lift. Because the swing arm pivot bolt is a 2-for-1, it gets the swing arm obviously and the engine little support there. I'm gonna go ahead and start with that one. That's gonna be the first bolt I put in after the lower engine mount bolt. And just because this bolt is only one direction, it can only be put in from this direction, I'm a little bit OCD about my bolt directions honestly for no other reason, just other than just because. But because this is the bolt I'm gonna go off of, the rest of the bolts that I put in will also be that same direction. Again, there's no point to that other than uniformity. And then also I have to put in this swing arm linkage before I put in my swing arm. I'll also flip this bolt around. The bolt that I'm holding, I'll flip that one. The swing arm actually went in pretty easily, all things considered. One thing to make sure is that you have all 4 of your cap seals on the ends of your swing arm mounts on both sides. Those help keep dust out, and they're also crucial for spacing to make sure you get a tight fit. So you can see how lopsided the weight is on this thing. All the weight's over the back right now, and my mounting point is even on the back of the frame. You know, it's not up here, it's back there. And this thing is still pretty sturdy, but we're starting to get to the threshold where it wants to lean back. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the other foot peg on this side, bolt it down, and then I might go ahead and start putting some of the front end stuff on. Putting on the A-arms is a really tight fit most times, especially with a powder coated frame. So when you're doing this, it really helps to have this lift again, because you can see I got my A-arms basically completely hanging 90 degrees downwards. So to make this as easy as possible, go ahead and get like a rubber mallet and just try and tap the A-arms into roughly the right place. You see I'm starting to get lined up there. And then once you get close, you can just put a screwdriver in the hole and line it up the rest of the way. And you should be able to put your bolt in pretty easily after that. All right, so right there. All right, that might be good. We'll see. Yeah, that's pretty much lined up. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and take the rubber mallet again. And don't ever work on ATVs with a freaking camera in your hand. This is difficult. It's funny, sometimes even non-threaded holes, if you just spin it clockwise, it'll line itself up. Third time's a charm. Perfect. Let's go. When you're putting together a 250 QuadRacer, there's a handful of what I'll call order of operations moments. Order of operations moments means when there's a part that has to go on before another part. So one of the biggest things with all years of 250 QuadRacer is putting the coil on before you put on the steering stem or the radiator. They go right here, and once you put the steering stem and radiator in, you can't access these two mounting points here anymore. There's screws that hold these on from the factory, and you just can't access them anymore. So that's a really important point, that you put the coil on first before anything else. Another, what I'll call order of operations moment. This is an 85 250 QuadRacer that's in progress. There's a project going on with it as well. But one thing to note is that you have to put, when you're assembling a first and second gen 250 QuadRacer, they've got the air box in front of the pivot, the rocker arm, and push rod style rear linkage, the full floater rear linkage. You have to put the air box in first before you assemble the rear suspension linkages. The air box does not fit out the front of it, at the front of the frame there. It can only fit going out the back. So that's another important order of operations thing when it comes to assembling 250 QuadRacers. And another thing when it comes to assembling Zillas, Quadzillas, this is a mint 1987 Quadzilla, and we had disassembled for some cleaning. And one thing is I forgot to put the pipe on first before I put all the fenders back on. And now the pipe, an OEM pipe, is extremely difficult to put into a 500. I would actually recommend, this sounds crazy, but I would recommend putting the pipe in before you put the motor in when you're assembling a Quadzilla. That's assuming that you're gonna run an OEM pipe. I'm assuming the only guys today that are running OEM pipes are building, mint OEM bikes. But that's another order of operations moment with the Suzuki QuadRacer. So yeah, super important. Technically, going back to the coil, technically, if you screw up and you put your steering stem and your radiator in first, you can technically, if you have one of these 90-degree bend screwdrivers, you can access these barely, and you can do like 10 degrees at a time. I guess you can't do 10 degrees because there's only 4 points. You kind of have to go 90 degrees before you can get a new bite on the screw heads. But if you've ever screwed up and done that, all you end up doing is you grade your knuckles on the back of the radiator, and it just scratches you all up, and you just get frustrated. So just make sure you put the coil on first before you put the steering stem and the radiator in. Also, as you can see, my two mounts here, I've ground the powder coat off. That's because anytime you've got a metal connection, here you can see the coil mounts up with two metal mounts. You want to make sure that the connection is solid. The electricity can flow between the grounded frame and the coil and all your electronics on the bike. Also, you can see I scraped the powder coat off here. That is so your rectifier, this guy, when he mounts, there is another wire. The screw goes through both of those, and they all need to be grounded as well. When you're mounting up your rear shock on the third gens, make sure that your linkage is mounted up first, and then you will mount the shock. And to help you find the bolt hole location for the bottom mount, you just lift up your swing arm and then lower it, and that will help you line everything up down low. This thing's really starting to take shape, and I just can't get over these colors. This thing pops so much, it's just crazy. This full tilt racing motor is just a piece of candy. The whole thing's just a piece of candy, and the yellow and the blue is just, and the white. Oh, it's just turning out so stinking nice. I'm gonna go ahead. I would put the wheels on for you guys just because it's fun to look at, but they're really gonna be in my way if I put the wheels on right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and put all my, what I'll call, rest of the internal stuff, the stuff that's going in the frame, I will go ahead and put on. And then if I get lucky today, I might be able to get it on its wheels and get it back down on the ground. We will see. I'll put the diagram up in the corner of the screen for you guys, but one thing I wanted to let you guys know, usually when you get one of these bikes used, they're just missing a handful of hardware that people just didn't think was all that crucial. But technically, you were supposed to have a cap seal. There's an O-ring and a washer actually, and then you're supposed to have another washer on the bottom side. There's a washer in there actually, and then you're supposed to have your cap seal goes on right there, and then you're supposed to have this thick washer, and then you're actually supposed to have a locking washer, but we're just gonna go ahead and put this castle nut on there because it's gonna have a cotter pin through it. But that is the order in which the steering stem hardware is supposed to be put on. So I'm gonna put the throttle cable into this carburetor, and I'm gonna try to show you guys how I do it. You guys might know this trick, you might not. The trick here is, I'm gonna put everything together. This is the top of my carburetor. I'm actually running an OEM carburetor for now that's been worked up by FTZ. The whole motor and exhaust and everything on this bike is FTZ. But what I'm gonna do here is I put the top of the carburetor on, I put the throttle cable through. I'm putting the spring on right now. Bear with me here. Okay, so I'm putting the spring through, and the trick here, when you put the spring, when you press the spring all the way up, is to have a pair of medical pliers like this, and go ahead and what the trick of these is that they lock. So I've got this here and they're locked. And it is, the spring can no longer extend and get in my way. So also, because this is a factory carburetor, I've got, this is the factory, it basically locks the throttle cable into its connection. So hopefully you guys can see what's going on down there, but I'm hooking my throttle cable in at the bottom. You can see that there. And then I am putting my locking mechanism down on there. Just gonna push that down in place. So now my throttle cable is locked in there, and then I can release my medical pliers and it releases my spring, and there you go. I found that it helps to unbolt the shock when you are trying to put on the airbox to carb boot. You take the bolt out, unbolt just the top, swing the shock back, and then actually put the bolt back in there just to prevent the shock from falling back into your way. But yeah, the clearances are really tight here, so getting any free space you can really helps out. The airbox to carb boot doesn't even seem like it's close to fitting. It's super, super dry. So I'm gonna try and loosen it up a little bit with a heat gun, and maybe we can then get it on to the carburetor, but otherwise I was having no luck with it. Heat guns can get really destructive if you use too much heat. So sometimes I keep my finger near the area where it's getting heated, just so I can kind of gauge how hot it actually is getting, because I don't want permanent deformation for sure. But I definitely need to get it heated up enough though to be stretchy. So there's a fine line. There we go. I was finally able to get it. It took quite a bit of heat to get that thing to stretch as much as it needed to, but it got on there finally. It's really coming along. Even with all the filming, it's only been about 3 hours total worth of work. So this is really, really moving fast, all things considered. I've got a handful of wiring gremlins I got to take care of. The plug, the coil plug boot, it got ripped off and the wires are all messed up. And then the wire actually coming out of the engine, someone just chopped it all off beforehand. I can promise it was not me. But I just gotta wire it all back up. I'm also gonna go ahead and mount these remote reservoirs up. I got these hose clamps ready to go, and I found a sheet of this is just like squishy rubber. It's the perfect consistency for what I wanted to make here. This is essentially, I'm just gonna put it here. I'm just gonna throw it in before I hose clamp it, and that'll be a guard between the powder coated frame and the remote reservoir. I'm gonna do the same thing in the rear here. This Works rear shock has a remote reservoir as well, and it's gonna run all the way up here, and I'll throw another one of the rubber pieces right in there to just keep things from scratching and rattling. But yeah, it's coming along. It's really, really cool to look at. So right now I'm installing the white radiator hoses. I've got a link in the description of where I got these. I actually got them off of eBay, but it has like the company and everything that they came from. They send them to you a little bit long, so I've had to trim up a couple chunks of it. Like here, I had to trim it up a little bit to get it to fit. I didn't want too much hose because it was actually bending and creating a valley, which if you create too deep of a valley, it may be difficult for the bike to pump it uphill, like too steeply uphill, if that makes any sense. So anyways, I cut it to fit so that the hose would be a lot flatter. And then I will probably have to cut this one a little bit whenever I install it. So there's that. I also was trying to get this FTZ pipe in there, and I realized that it was actually hitting the stand. This is like the one time where it isn't advantageous to be using this stand, so I'll have to wait till the bike is on the ground to put the FTZ pipe in. But that's why I had the radiator sideways, or the carburetor sideways as well, is because I was actually snaking the pipe up there, trying to get it all to fit, and it wasn't working. But yeah, I've got to get these radiator hoses cut down, and then I'm going to run all the brakes, and then I might be able to put the wheels on and get this thing on the ground. Oh, one other thing I was going to mention is this PEP steering stabilizer here. It's made to mount on the engine mount right here. I have to put these engine mounts on still, and once I do that, I will be able to mount this steering stabilizer up, and it basically just clamps onto your stem here. It can adjust, go up and down, and with these remote reservoirs, it's really tight for me right now, actually. I don't know if you guys can see it, but where it's gonna sit, it's just barely gonna clear the frame and barely gonna clear the remote reservoir. But it should still have plenty of room to travel. I just gotta lock it all down tight and make sure it doesn't shift on me. But yeah, it's coming along. We're getting closer. All right, guys, so that's a wrap of day one. Day one, we got a ton done. I didn't think we'd get this far, but here we are. One thing you saw right at the very end, I had to actually take the radiator back off because I forgot another one of those order of operations things. You gotta put the brake system on first before you put the radiator and ideally the steering stem in as well. You can't put the brake calipers. So assuming that you're not going to break your brake system loose, you're going to keep all the lines connected and together, you have to put it on before you put the radiator and the steering stem on. This brake system has been sitting in a tub for about a year, and it's actually still good. I tested it this morning, so I said, well, if I don't have to break the brake system apart, then why do it? So with that in mind, I had to route one of the calipers through this whole mess right here, and it wouldn't fit unless I took the radiator off. So I had to take the radiator back off. Not a big deal, but yeah, Otherwise, I mean, this thing is just looking incredible. I just can't get over this motor, how much it shines. The camera doesn't do it any justice. This motor is perfect. It's truly a piece of candy. It's ridiculous. I've got to go over the whole bike again and tighten everything down, just do a once over everything. I've got to, obviously, I still got to put the rear brakes on. I got to put the carrier bolts in there and just a handful of things. I got to change that number. I don't even really have a number, but that's definitely not it. Let's see, what else? I got to install the exhaust system, obviously finish up some wiring, and then put the tank and then the fenders and everything on, and then we're gonna see what she sounds like and how she performs. I just can't get over how pretty this thing is. This thing is just so eye-catching, it's insane. I hope you guys all enjoyed. If you would, obviously, please like and subscribe. It really lets me know that you guys are out there and want to see more of this stuff. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed part 1 of Project LT250r. This thing is coming along way faster than I thought it would, and it's turning out way prettier and cooler than I ever thought it would too. This thing's going to be awesome. I can't wait to get it done, rip it, see how it performs, and then move on to the next cool build we got planned. If you guys like this, yes, please comment, like, and subscribe, and do all that stuff. It really does let me know you're out there, and it lets me know that I should keep spending my time doing stuff like this. But anyways, until next time, guys, thanks for watching.